Well, the number one thing that everybody should have is a revocable living trust, a family trust. We're all going to die someday.
Ah, there we go.
When the good Lord takes you, you never know. Whether you're single, married, have kids, don't have kids, having a revocable living trust is something that everybody should do.
The military taught us discipline, it taught us leadership, but it never taught us how to really build wealth and income. This is the Active Duty Passive Income Podcast, and I'm your host, Markian Sich, a United States Marine turned full-time real estate investor and educator. I'm bringing you the most successful military, veteran, and military spouse real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and industry experts to break down exactly how they did it, so you can too. Hey there, ADPI Nation. This is Markian Sich, your host of the Active Duty Passive Income Podcast, and wow, we've got yet another awesome episode for you today. And I have an incredible guest who I've known for quite a few years now, and he's performed live. He was on stage at ADPICon multiple times now, and every single time he talks about what his expertise is, you see jaws dropping. So Adam Kintigh is going to talk to us today about all sorts of things, primarily how to protect your assets and your own personal liability through a proper legal structure. He works for Nevada Corporate Headquarters, which is an incredible partner of ours. And trust me, we've worked with many different companies, and these are, NCH is, I think you guys use the word care when you talk about our members all the time. And that's why we love working with you all, because you really care for our members. You really go above and beyond. So Adam, can you please give us a little bit of just 30 seconds about yourself and what your background is and how you got into working with people like this? And then we're going to dive into some real details, like what our members should know and what they can do to really grow their wealth and income.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So our firm is NCH, 36th year in business. We have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, I think 18,000 5-star reviews. The backbone of our company is we form corporations and LLCs. In-house, we have a full legal department. I have one of the best CPA firms. We do tax and accounting for business owners and investors all over the country. We have a business credit team. If you ever want to separate business credit from personal credit, we have a team that does.
I got to talk to you about that.
We have a team that does custom business plans. We do estate planning like trust and wills. And then we also do self-directed IRAs and self-directed 401ks. So all those support services for business owners and investors is what NCH specializes in. And I personally have been doing this since 2001, so 24 years. I started with NCH in 2008. I am not an attorney. I'm not a CPA. I'm not a financial advisor. But we have CPAs and attorneys and people that I rely on in my office to make sure that we're at the tip of the sword every day with helping people to set things up properly. And we just want to be mindful. And when we're setting up entities, LLCs, trust, et cetera, we wanted to do it in a way that is manageable, scalable, and financially efficient. So you're a lot of different structures, but what NCH cares about is whatever you do, you've got to maintain all these things. So we just want to make sure we're doing things right for you and your family.
Yeah, and when you say the word financially efficient, it's funny. I bet a lot of our members are like, oh, that means it's super cheap service. Here's what I'll tell you. This is what Adam really means. It means that they will help you strategize your structures from not only like how to do it to where you don't overdo it, you don't underdo it for your own liability protection, but also that you're forming it in a tax savvy way. Guys, if you actually structure this stuff right, your long-term wealth is, the compounding effect of doing it right day one is massive. That's what he's talking about. And I can't understate how much of a difference I have personally seen in just structuring things the right way to S Corp versus LLC or whatnot. Like the differences are massive. And sometimes they're very small nuances that are honestly hard to pick up. You can't just Google. Somebody off of LegalZoom won't know what the heck they're talking about. The boilerplate operating agreement won't cut it, all those kinds of things. Let's talk about LLCs to start off, and then we're going to get into some of the super cool tactics of when it really comes to like rubber hitting the road and how you can make more money knowing all this cool stuff, not only protecting yourself. But LLCs, like they're widely accepted, and I've heard you mention that it's just the most valuable tool when it's set up properly, right? What do you think some of the biggest mistakes are that people make when they try to set up an LLC, and they maybe bit them later down the road? And what are some of the things that maybe you're like, this is the meat and potatoes that you got to know?
Yeah, so the SOP is if you are starting a business or you're going to be an investor, rule number one, get your LLC established immediately. And I can't tell you how many people they were just starting something and they're bootstrapping and they don't want to spend the money on the LLC, so they just go file it themselves. And then later on, fast forward 3 to 5 years down the road, now you've got a massive rental portfolio or you've got a thriving business. And it shows right on public record, 95% of the time, it shows right on public record who formed this company, who is the organizer, you. And in the event of an accident, the first thing a lawyer is going to do is go to the Secretary of State, pull up your company. They're going to see that you're your own registered agent. They're going to see that you organize the company. And they pretty much know right away that this isn't right. So those are the contingency fee law firms that are going to take these cases for free. They're going to hand you a notice they're suing you with a subpoena for your corporate record book. I can't tell you how many people I talk to on a weekly basis that don't even have a corporate record book. All they've done is filed their articles and nothing else. And when you need it most, that LLC is going to fail you. So getting it done right is so important in having the right pieces. And that's oftentimes missed. And again, because you're trying to save some money, so you go ahead and form it yourself, or you go through one of these paperwork mills and they give you all these options. Would you like a corporate record book? Would you like initial organizational minutes? Would you like an operating agreement? Would you like an S election? They offer all these things a la carte as if you don't need half of it.
Yeah, little checks on the survey or whatever.
So that's the biggest mistake is when getting started, trying to save a few bucks, forming your own company or going through one of these paperwork mills. Right. Not a good idea. Just do it right.
Okay. And what about why is the LLC so valuable? What is its primary purpose?
The number one goal is the corporate veil. That is the legal separation between you and your company. So think of it as the Great Wall of China with you on one side and your business on the other. Okay. And we just want to make sure that corporate veil is always intact. The most heavily litigated issue in corporate law today is piercing the corporate veil, which means your company gets sued. The courts disregard the fact that you're an LLC and they hold you or your partners personally liable. That is piercing the veil. And statistically, the corporate veil gets pierced almost 50% of the time. This is exclusively with small business. When you have 5 shareholders or less, makes it really easy for lawyers to make alter ego claims. They say, well, you own the LLC, you control the LLC, you are the LLC. This is nothing more than a sham. So when we set up an entity, always set it up either in Nevada or Wyoming. If you're going to take your company public, we would set it up in Delaware. Delaware has the best laws for big business, but for small business, Nevada and Wyoming are really the 2 most important states. You don't have to live in Nevada or Wyoming. You just have to have a registered agent, and it's the laws of the state of incorporation shall govern the internal affairs and liabilities of managers and members of LLCs. So we get to take advantage of all of the unique laws that have been built over the years for small business when we set things up in Nevada and Wyoming, 2 very best states for small business. So we organize under the laws of Wyoming, for example, and then we must register the LLC appropriately with whatever state you're doing business or whatever state you're buying property in. It's a very simple process, but it needs to be done, and it needs to be done right.
Awesome. Okay. So you don't want to get your corporate veil pierced. Got it. And it's kind of interesting, the alter ego stuff. I didn't know that for the longest time, but it does make sense. You hear all the movies oh, it's just a shell company and this, that, and the other thing. In reality, you can't just slap an LLC together on LegalZoom and think you're protected. That's the bottom line, I feel like. Now, what about what's something that you find, maybe some of our military members that they go gosh, I wish I would have done that sooner. Is there something that comes to mind? Yeah, I don't know, just timing wise, because I think a lot of military, the whole setting up a business thing, especially if you're active duty, it's not something we're taught.
Yeah, it all depends on what you're doing. So if you're starting a business, for example, and you're an active income producing business, usually we elect for it to be taxed as an S corporation. It significantly reduces your audit risk. And when you start making money, it allows us to save a lot of money in self-employment taxes. So making that S election is super
Right.
important if it's a business. If it is rental properties, then it needs to be a disregarded LLC or an LLC that's taxed as a partnership. And I've seen many people over the years that have put rental properties inside of an S Corp or an LLC taxed as an S Corp. It causes all kinds of tax problems. One of the greatest generational wealth tools we have is you build out your rental portfolio. When you die, these things are going to pass on to your kids. They get a step up in basis. So a property you bought today, fast forward 15 years from now, you bought it for $200 and now it's worth $800. That's a $600,000 increase, which happens all the time. But if you have that property inside of an S Corp or a C Corp, you do not get the step up in basis. So making sure you have the right taxation when you set it up is very important.
Right. Okay. Step up. Just to be very clear, you're literally saying that its past price is now getting adjusted at the time of you passing it to your, the next generation, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
So
super important.
Yeah, they could sell the house the next day and not pay a dime in taxes.
In capital gains, right.
Absolutely incredible. The government has some limits. If you're a wealthy person and you've got, I think this year, if it's over $14 million, double that if you're married, $28 million that you can pass on without any inheritance tax. That law, we got to pay attention. It's set to go
probably enough.
Supposed to go back to $7 million starting on January 1st of 2026. If you're one of those people that your estate has been growing, something that we need to pay attention to because there are ways of minimizing these taxes when you get above a certain level.
Okay. So now let's talk about one more very important part of like the protecting yourself puzzle. And then also let's talk about maybe some of our investors at ADPI have multiple properties, what you would kind of recommend. And I think it's important that you were talking about like, hey, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a CPA, but you are a practitioner and a strategist. Like that is, all this stuff like the back of your hand, and you've seen so many of our members set this stuff up, the good, the bad, and the uglies, and then helping them from the insurance perspective. We see this all the time. People think, oh, insurance is good enough. I just get $1 million liability policy and have the insurance attorneys fight on my behalf. And that's even better than an LLC, or that's all I really need. There are some instances where that was all somebody needed was an insurance policy. But a lot of times that is not all you need. Can you speak to that? Like when, for example, I have both, right? I'm like, yes, I love the insurance attorneys who are paid massive billable hours to fight for me, right? And I've had to do that many times. But I also have the LLC because of the personal protection. So anyways, I wanted you to see if you could break that down for our members.
Yeah, so I tell everyone, keep good insurance. But remember, insurance is a hedge against loss. The goal of you having that insurance, if something bad happens, you want to pay out as little as possible, and that's why you have the insurance.
Right.
But the insurance companies have adjusters and attorneys. And remember, if they paid out on every claim that came through, they would quickly go bankrupt. So they have adjusters and attorneys whose job it is to pay out as little as possible on claims. So you are competing with your insurance company to pay out the least amount. And who's going to win? It is always the insurance company. So you go read your policy and the binder for that policy. It's about 4 inches thick. And the reason is not to protect you, is to protect these insurance companies. So keep good insurance. But just remember, there's so many things that can happen. The insurance won't pay or won't pay enough. That's where having the LLC is truly going to protect you. And then oftentimes I hear people say, oh, get an umbrella policy. It covers everything. Right. Well, the news flash, you can get $1 million umbrella for $200-300 a year. Why is that umbrella so cheap? Answer, the umbrella only kicks in if the underlying policy exhausts its policy limits. Your chances of winning the Texas state lottery are twice as good. So chances of that. Now I have an umbrella because I have 6 boys and 5 of them drive, and soon to be 6, they drive my vehicles. The only insurance I have that, in my view, that might max out a policy limit is my auto insurance. So that's why I've got my umbrella policy. It's so inexpensive. Again, $205 a year is what I pay for $1 million. So I do have one, but I don't rely on that for protecting anything. Again, it's just a hedge against loss.
I see. That kind of makes more sense. And I love how you got 5 driving boys. Okay, you want to make sure you just have, because if you're basically, you have, because of the amount of drivers you have in your family, the probability, God forbid, of you potentially, busting through that threshold is probably greater than somebody who only has 1 or 2 drivers in their family, right? So that's why you're like, okay, it kind of makes financial sense for me to rope that in, the umbrella policy. Okay. And it is literally just yet another layer on top is what it is. And it kind of encompasses, in this case, your entire family or a legal structure, whatever. Okay. So it sounds like, no, an insurance policy is not enough, especially if you want to scale significantly. You really just can't afford losing your assets that you're working so hard for, or your own personal, livelihood. So let's talk about that. If you do have multiple entities, I mean, there's so many ways I've heard it, 1 property per entity, or 3 properties per entity, or put everything in a single entity, screw all those registered agent fees, or make it to where your what do you call it? The general liability number is roughly the value of the assets. I've heard it all, right? So what is kind of your approach? What do you strategize about?
Yeah, so it really depends on, for rental properties, it depends on the financing that you're using. So a lot of our members were using the VA loan, buy that house, live there a few years, you get PCS to another city, turn it into a rental. And a really common fallacy we have is people say, well, if you quit claim that property into an LLC, you violated the mortgage agreement. And as soon as the bank sells the mortgage, they do an internal audit. They're going to see that your name is not on public record, and they can always invoke the due on sale clause and call your mortgage due. That is not a letter you want to get. What we do a little bit different is we put each property into a land trust. We call them real estate privacy trust. It's like a land trust on steroids. It allows us to separate the liability of each property without having to have a bunch of LLCs. And there's a federal law, it's called the Garn-St. Germain Act of 1982, that when we put property into a trust, by law, the bank can do nothing. They cannot invoke the due on sale clause, period. You never have to worry about it. So I would have multiple rentals. It's driven off the financing. But my rule of thumb is I could have 20 rentals under 1 LLC, each property in its own land trust. That will separate the liability. If there's a problem with one, it can affect the others. But more importantly, is if you are getting, for example, a DSCR loan, that's the debt service coverage ratio. Maybe you don't have enough income personally to qualify, but you got the down payment. So you go and finance the property in the name of your LLC versus when you finance it in your name, usually you get better rates. If I buy a property using my name and my credit, I'll get better rates. So I want to buy it, and then I'll quick claim it into a land trust so that now I'm protected. The land trust is effectively owned by the LLC. LLC collects the rent, pays the expenses, whatever's left, write yourself a check. Do not use the LLC checkbook to pay for your personal bills. No commingling funds, and we're good. So that's if we're doing residential. So fourplex, triplex, duplex, single family home, townhome, condo, we use the land trust. If you go commercial, 5 units and above, the loans are different, and you need to set up your LLC and do the loan in the name of the LLC if you're going commercial. So everything is really based on your risk tolerance level and how many eggs you want in one basket. So if you are going to hold title directly in the name of an LLC, which you sure can, you just want to make sure no more than 3 to 5 properties per LLC, no more than $1 million of fair market value per LLC. We never mix commercial with residential. And again, it just boils down to your risk tolerance level. So we have that strategy we're saying. A lot of attorneys will tell you, well, every property needs its own LLC, so if there's a problem with one, it won't affect the others. And I will tell you, I could go on for 5 hours about nightmare stories where people have done this. Guy in New Jersey set up 21 LLCs. Every time he bought a new property, he would just go file the document articles with the New Jersey Secretary of State and deed the property in, set up a new checking account, and off he went. Well, he got sued. It was a squatter. One of his properties was vacant. It was a squatter. She was drunk and high, slipped and fell and broke the blade and filed a lawsuit. So what happened in that lawsuit is, of course, the lawyer pulled up. They found very quickly that not just one property, but 20 other properties in LLCs that were all formed by himself. They sued his LLC and they sued him personally. And when he got brought into a deposition, he had to list all 21 LLCs that he wholly owned. And because it was a New Jersey LLC, they were going after everything. And when I talked to him, I was teaching a class there, and he said, Adam, I've been in litigation now for 3 years. I've learned more in talking with you for 15 minutes than I've learned from working with these insurance companies. And they are doing exactly what you said, and they are going after everything that I have, and it's costing him a fortune. So these are the nightmare stories of A, doing it yourself, B, having a separate property or a separate LLC and not structured in the right state. Because had he set that up in Nevada or Wyoming, he would have got a law called charging order protection, where A, they can only pierce the veil if he was committing fraud. It's fraud or manifest injustice, which requires the courts go inside your mind to determine your ill intent. You're not committing fraud. They would never be able to pierce the veil to sue you personally, setting it up in Nevada and Wyoming. But second, with the charging order protection, is they can file the lawsuit and they can win, but the charging order or the judgment they would receive is the sole and exclusive remedy of the judgment creditor, eliminating the possibility of judicial foreclosure. This squatter would have, if she would have won the lawsuit, she would be stuck with the judgment, hoping he someday distributes a profit. That is her only remedy to get paid. And on top of that, with the charging order protection is no reverse piercing. So if he did get sued personally, they can sue him, they can win, cannot touch the Nevada or Wyoming LLC to satisfy his personal debts and obligations. So, of course, in talking with him, he said, I got to get this done right away. And my response was, yeah, I'm sorry. That is fraudulent conveyance or fraudulent transfer. We're not doing anything without
too late, buddy. Be proactive. If you don't mind, I'd like to go over like the rule of thumbs a little bit. So you said just rule of thumb. Actually, Adam, I'm going to pause real quick. Your video is frozen. Can you refresh your camera maybe? If not, it's not a big deal. If it's not working, or turn it on, turn it off or something.
Yeah, that would require some technical skills that I don't have. There we go.
There we go. Okay, sweet. Awesome. So Adam, if you don't mind, I'd like to go over the rules of thumb that you mentioned. Again, these are a rule of thumb. Everybody's situation is unique. I'd recommend they just talk to you directly, which, by the way, if you got to go, I want to drop one important resource for everybody, because we're going to be talking about self-directed IRAs here in a little bit and 401ks. If you want to get in contact with Adam, go to activedutypassiveincome.com/IRA, India Romeo Alpha, right? And that'll get you in contact with Adam to talk about any of these things that we are discussing right now. So yeah, but back to the rule of thumb. Adam, you're talking about roughly 3 to 5 properties per LLC. You're saying total value locked in the LLC maybe shouldn't exceed $1 million, right? So that's something like that. Does that include like the debt, like total value, or just your equity owned in it?
Fair market value.
Fair market value. Okay, so whatever the properties are worth, keep it at under $1 million, rule of thumb again. And the other thing that you mentioned, depending on what kind of financing and what kind of situation you're in, with, as long as it's residential loans that were initially in your name, is you could deed them over to a trust called a REPT, a real estate privacy trust. Is that right?
Correct.
So you deed it over there instead of deeding it over to the LLC. And then you ensure that the trust, what do you do? Do you deed it over to the LLC at this point?
Well,
okay.
We quitclaim the property into the trust, and it's
quitclaim.
not
there you go.
record, but that trust is owned by the LLC. The lifetime beneficiary of this land trust is your LLC, and that's what protects you. A trust by itself, there is no asset protection, so it's got to be set up right with an LLC.
Right. So the LLC provides the protection. The land trust is what provides the due on sale clause to not happen, right? Okay. So guys, the due on sale clause, just to make sure I'm foot stomping this, is basically a lot of times if you quit, actually most of the time, as long as you're still paying your mortgage, the bank's not going to double check. But what could happen, and this has happened in the past, is that if you deed or you quit claim deed a property over to an LLC, technically the ownership has now changed, and a bank could say, well, look, to us that looks like a sale, So we want to call due on the note now because to us it looks like you sold it. Typically, banks don't want to deal with that crap if they don't have to, unless it's financially beneficial to them. So did I misspeak on any of that, Adam? Like that's the point of this land trust, right?
Yep.
So it's a double layer, right? So you can put them into an LLC, but add that extra layer for yourself to not have to worry about the bank at all, especially if you're working at small credit unions. They might want to do that. If you're working with Mr. Cooper, somebody big, typically they just don't have time for this. But again, if you're putting your stuff into an LLC, you don't want that due on sale clause to happen. Put it into a land trust first, specifically a real estate privacy trust, then move it over to the LLC. Now you're good. Now you're golden. Oh, and by the way, probably do it and have that be in Nevada, right?
Yeah, the LLC we want to be Nevada or Wyoming. The trust they exist under federal trust statutes. They're good in almost all 50 states. I get careful about Oregon does not recognize a land trust, so we can't do Oregon. And then I'm always very careful about Pennsylvania because any other state, if I quit claim a property into a land trust, there's no transfer tax. I'm not selling the property. I'm just changing the way we hold title. Pennsylvania, they're going to whack you with a 2 to 5% transfer tax, even if you put it into a land trust. So these are areas that we need to be mindful of.
Okay, yeah. Let's not do it in Pennsylvania. Okay, awesome. That is just some very brass tacks, meat and potatoes, breaking it down Barney style for somebody like me that's a Marine. I need to make sure I understand what we're talking about here. Very simple. Got it. Okay, so I think those are really good rules of thumb. And in fact, I think we should make like a graphic for our community on that. Like just this is what it is, right? Like as a North Star in case they ever need to reference something. Now, let's talk about the money making stuff. One more, just maybe let's eat our vegetables first. S Corp versus LLC, and then we're going to talk about self-directed IRAs here. S Corp and LLC. What my understanding is that the reason why you don't want to put a rental property inside of an S Corp, there's all sorts of stuff that happens, but really you don't get to pass down, if you want, to your personal tax returns some of the losses that real estate is known for. For example, everybody, I own a 56-unit apartment complex with my parents, okay? Best investment we ever made, bar none, even though it was a bumpy road in the beginning, okay? I did this while I was still a lieutenant in the Marine Corps, didn't know what I was doing, somehow convinced Freddie Mac to loan to me and my parents, okay, on a $2.6 million property. We got this thing, it's now worth close to $6 million, okay? So we really want to make sure it's protected. So we have an LLC there as well and an insurance policy, all the kind of stuff Adam and I have talked about because it's a commercial loan, so you have to have it in an LLC. But what happened with this particular deal is that we wanted to make sure that not only was it protected from the standpoint of
So money making S Corp versus LLC.
Yeah. So this 56 unit that me and my parents own, we bought it in 2017 for $2.6 million. I don't know how we got it approved. We just fought tooth and nail to get the bank and Freddie Mac, a government-backed loan to basically lend to us. And what we did is we put it in an LLC because it's a commercial loan, like we've talked about, right? But on my tax returns, which I just finished this year on this thing, it showed over $300,000 in net operating income, okay? So this thing is making a significant amount of money. However, because of, you also have to include the loan, but minus the land, we get to take this value and we divide the value of that property by 27.5, and we count that against the income. And so what ended up happening, the actual bottom line that we have to pay taxes on is negative $15,000. So even though it made $328,000 net operating income, I'm actually not paying anything. I'm not paying anything in taxes because my mom is a real estate professional. So she gets to claim unlimited passive losses. I'm a real estate professional. I do a ton of real estate. So I get to claim unlimited passive losses. And so that wouldn't be possible potentially if I had an S Corp because now that does not get passed down to my tax return. I do not get, if I had an even bigger loss, but I had active income somewhere else, I'd be able to count those passive losses against my other income. But if I had an S Corp, it'd probably stop. Am I correct in how I explain that?
Yeah. What would happen with the S Corp is you still would get those losses. So S Corp does flow through to your personal return. It was passive losses. They would still flow through. The problem is when you have an S Corporation, number one, when you die, your kids are not going to get a step up.
Right.
If you had it in an S Corp or an LLC, taxes an S Corp. And then for some people that you are doing if more than 25% of your income in an S Corp is passive for a 3-year period, they will convert the S Corp to a C Corp. They mark you as a dealer and they say, hey, all your passive income is now active. None of your depreciation losses count. Oh, and by the way, you now owe Social Security and Medicare on that rent you've been collecting.
Ouch.
So we never, ever have rental properties inside of an S Corp. You could have an S Corp that manages your rentals. Perfect. But the actual property itself either needs to be an LLC that is disregarded or taxed as a partnership. So we get the step up in basis. We're conceding to the IRS, even if we're flipping houses. If you buy and sell more than one property a year, again, they'll come back and tag you as a dealer. It's never the first year. They'll always wait about 3 or 4 years. By having the separate companies, all of my dealer activity would be taking place through my LLC taxes and S Corp. I'm keeping my passive income separate, so that could never happen. So these are things that we get into the nitty gritty with each person we work with, because there's just so many variables, and finding answers online is really tough.
So this is what I pride myself in, and I feel like I just got confused when I mentioned it. So thank you for setting me straight. But so it still passes through with an S Corp, because technically, guys, an S Corp is an LLC, but it's taxed as you do an S election, right, Adam? So it's just taxed differently. So it still passes through, but isn't there potentially like a basis or something that still gets kept? Anyways, I don't want to confuse our members. The point is, I think it's the rule of thumb that we need to focus on, is LLCs are the best for rental properties, because none of the stuff Adam just mentioned you're ever going to have to worry about. If you do want to cut yourself a W-2, like I have an S Corp, I was able to cut myself a W-2, which looks great for me for income if I want to qualify for another loan and pay less in like the taxes as far as like the employment taxes, but that's active income. Me and my wife, we were doing social media on the side. I was kind of like subcontracting her, and that was very active income, and so that's why it made sense there. But for real estate, for rental properties, passive, LLC all the way, right? Cool. Now, let's say somebody wants to buy more rental properties, okay? And they're like, shoot, I'm out of money, or I don't have enough for the down payment, or I want to get into large commercial multifamily apartment complexes, and I need to figure out how to raise hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars from people, right? It's, first of all, obviously it's kind of a scary thing to come up to people and be like, hey, do you want to give me $100,000 and trust me that I'm going to do this thing, right? That's why ADPI exists. We have our education, you build teams, and you're able to do that in a confident manner, right, with the support of a community and a framework. But you still need to know the tactics. Okay, what are some of the tools of the trade? I love this concept of going to your friends and, well, sometimes family, and just asking them if they have a TSP that they want to roll over, an IRA that maybe they just have and it's, performing decently, but definitely not supercharged by real estate, or a 401k at a job that they had for a few years that maybe they forgot that's just chilling there, right? You'd be surprised at how much this happens. I mean, there's $13.2 trillion in retirement accounts that is underperforming right now. There's plenty of money out there, and all of us have hundreds of contacts in our phone. And so what I suggest to people to do, and this is where I want you to walk us through the mechanics, is to talk to your, pick 10 people a day, call them up, be like, hey, I want to do this real estate thing. Here's what the deals are going to look like. Or maybe you already have a deal and I want to set it up. We can go in on it together, whether you're going to do a syndication or whatever, or maybe just a JV, a joint venture. You can have NCH help you set that up, but I want to raise some money from you. Do you have an IRA or a 401k or something like that that has some money in it that you think it can do better? And then when they say yes, be like, well, it's your lucky day, because I'm going to teach you how to do that without paying any tax penalties, right? And where it's not going to bust through like the rules of the IRA. It's still going to be in an IRA legitimately, or a 401k, right? Can you talk us through what the right way to do that is with this self-directed stuff?
Really important. So self-directed, first thing to recognize is any retirement account can be self-directed. We have to be mindful, if you are with a current employer and you're currently with the military, for example, you have an active TSP, you can't self-direct that account until you retire. So once you retire, then we can roll those funds over. And again, it's a rolling it over. We're not paying taxes or penalties. We're just rolling it from one plan to another. But for the most part, if you have a 401k with a current employer, your spouse has a 401k, and that's your current employer, you can't roll it over unless you're over 59 and a half years of age. So just make a mental note. If you're over 59 and a half, 99% you can do an in-service rollover. Even though you're still there and still making contributions, you could roll over all or some of that money. But IRAs, 401k, 403b, 457, TIA CREF, TSPs, and
I didn't even know there was so many retirement. Okay,
so
there's a lot of
these can be rolled over. And most of the time, like right now, you're with Fidelity, for example, and their idea of self-directed and your idea of self-directed are two different things. They say, yeah,
Okay.
you choose which one of these stocks, bonds, and mutual funds do you want to invest in. And you say, no, I want to do real estate. And I say, yeah, well, we have a real estate investment trust. Works just like a stock. You can invest in a real estate investment trust, a REIT. You say, no, I really wanted to, me and my brother are going to buy property. I want to do that. And they'll say, well, you can't do that. Mm-hmm. It is not prohibited. IRC section 4975 in the tax code gives us the rules to follow. I can buy real estate. I can do private lending. I can loan money out of my IRA to you, anybody I want, that is not part of my vertical lineage. So I cannot loan money to mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, kids, and grandkids. I can loan money to brother, sister, cousin, uncle, anybody outside the vertical lineage is okay. But we would roll those funds over to, we use Horizon Trust as our self-directed custodian. They provide excellent service, and I'm rolling it over. And that allows me just to move those funds without taxes, without penalties. And then I just do what's called a direction of investments. I draft up a promissory note with me and the person that I'm borrowing money from. Here's our promissory note. I'm going to pay you back over a set number of years, and here's the interest. And you sign that and give it to Horizon, and they're going to, using that self-directed account, they're just going to wire you those funds. And you will have a payment schedule, and you can make up whatever rules you want. You can say, listen, my brother is going to loan me $100,000 out of his IRA, and it is going to be 6% interest with 3 years, no prepayment penalty, no monthly payments. 3 years, I'm going to pay him back his money. You can make up whatever terms you want. It's got to be reasonable. Wow. I just read this morning that there are usury laws. So some states, depending on how much interest you're charging, you can't charge too much interest. There's usury laws. So you have to check with your state. I just heard that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB, has been put on hold. That might be. I was
going to say, aren't they getting shut down or something?
Yeah. So, but they were like this government agency regulating all these things, and you don't want to cross that line. You can't go, post an ad on Facebook that says I'm looking for money for my commercial syndication. Now you're soliciting investments, and you got to be licensed to do that. So if you are doing something like that, doing the bigger projects, they definitely want to get with you on the commercial side, because there are rules we have to follow, and we have to set up a private placement memorandum and other things. But if you're just dealing with friends and family and asking to borrow money, doing the promissory note, you get the LLC set up, and that money comes into your LLC. Now you can go out and buy those properties, the bigger deals, or if you needed money for a down payment or whatever the case may be, you can do it by helping your friends and family invest with you in your business alongside of what you're doing. That's the power of a self-directed IRA. And again, Fidelity wouldn't let you do it, but Horizon, they allow us to do that.
It's funny. I think that, companies like Fidelity, or actually the military sometimes, because we're also conservative financially, or that's how we're kind of brought up as you're going through the ranks, is that we almost look at real estate as like an alternative investment, like, ooh, that's like going outside of the norm. And I said alternative in the context of real estate to my general counsel, and he chuckled. He's like, it's funny, because he's like, dude, real estate is the tried and true investment. You calling it alternative makes me chuckle. But when it comes to these IRAs, that's not what you typically think about. You don't typically think to be buying a property, or actually, let me clarify that. So we talked about promissory notes, guys, right? It's just a loan from one person or one entity to another. Can you invest into equity? Can you buy a piece of real estate through one of these? Is that possible?
Absolutely. Now we have to be mindful. There are some rules about if you're getting a loan, for example. If I were to go buy a rental property myself, I put 20% down. I get a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. Off I go. I'm personally guaranteeing the loan. I'm getting the best rates. But when it comes to using IRAs and solo Ks, these are both options that we deal with. It has to be a non-recourse loan, meaning if you don't make the payment, the bank cannot come after you. They just get the property back. Because it's riskier for the bank, generally you got to have 50% as a down payment. So we have to be careful about this, because if I'm buying a rental property that has debt on it and I'm doing it in an IRA, I could be subject to a tax called a UDFI, unrelated debt financed income tax, where I've got to file a tax return and report to the IRS the amount of money that I made as a result of that loan. And it is a very short, steep scale. Starts at 10% when you make $900 and very quickly climbs to 37% tax when you're above like $12,500. It's crazy. So be mindful of that if it's an IRA. I love about the solo K, it is exempt. It does not pay the UDFI tax. So these are the facts and circumstances that we have to look at what you're doing and how you're doing it. If you qualify for a solo 401k, great. If you don't, we're going to do an IRA. Doesn't mean you can't make these investments or do these deals, but we just have to be mindful of the rules that we now have to follow when we're using IRAs.
Okay. And what about, you touched on it a little bit with like the syndications and the PPM. So if somebody is a general partner, so this is somebody that operates, they find, they acquire, they finance, they manage, and they basically reposition, they make these properties way better. So let's say they buy like one of mine, a 56 unit apartment complex, and they buy it for $2.6 million and they want to go raise capital and tell their investors, I'm going to turn it into a $6 million property, right? And I want you along on the ride. I want you to benefit. I want all of us to benefit. The fact that they're raising money from what's called a limited partner, somebody who's not legally allowed to influence the operations, is that something you can invest in as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I have a lot of clients that do invest in these commercial syndications using their IRA funds. And I just talked to a guy earlier this year. I've been working with him for about 15 years. And he got recently, within the past 3 to 5 years, started doing syndications. And I said, hey, by the way, how are those investments doing? He goes, Adam, I've been averaging 20% returns on my commercial syndications, which is crazy. Yesterday morning, I had a call with my mom's financial advisor with her IRAs and such. And he said, well, we're shooting for an average of 8%. So you look at some of these returns on these things compared to my mom's traditional stock market investments, that's pretty good.
Yeah, and something that I always think about when it comes to the average return, I want to be very careful with the word average when I talk to people about average in the stock market, because if there's a year where it goes down, pure math, you can average that down year out. You can smooth it out and it'll look like it's doing well. But the fact is, if you really run the math, a down year, if you go down 20% one year, that might put you back a couple of years of growth, even though then the next years you're averaging, again, 8. But 1 year going down over the long haul, it looks like it's fine. The only way, to really remedy that math, like just pure math wise, is you got to keep investing during that down year, because that's the only way you'll be able to catch up or stay on pace. But that doesn't always happen 9 times out of 10. And so with real estate, I just feel like it's almost like it has to win, right? It's baked into the system because we all rely on a place to live. And I'm talking about specifically residential, and like residential commercial, like large apartment complexes. Yes, there's going to be down years, but you actually own a physical structure, right? And there's more to the returns than just the value of the property. If you run your numbers right, you get cash flow. You're going to get the tax benefits. Somebody else is paying the freaking loan on your behalf, right? So this is why I think I'm a real estate maximalist. So this is a real estate show. So I'm always going to put in my 2 cents of why you guys should really think about it. Okay, let's just go through some like super quick, rapid fire questions here. And just, 30 seconds or less, let us know what your thoughts are on some of these questions. And then we'll see if there's anything we can wrap up with that you feel like we haven't touched on. You ready to rock?
I'm ready. Okay.
What do you think the biggest myth is with LLCs and asset protection that you just love debunking? You're just like, oh, I love this. This is a zinger.
Yeah, the biggest myth is, that's a tough one. There's a lot of myths about this.
There's a lot of them. I know.
There's so many of them. Yeah, the biggest myth is I don't need an LLC, just get good insurance. That's the number one myth.
Right. Well, we did talk about that one.
Yeah.
I think we have definitely foot stomped that enough. So I love that. Now, what's the biggest, let's say somebody hasn't even bought their first property yet, okay? What is your biggest advice, even before they get their first property? Is there something they can do to start preparing? Or is that just no, wait till you get the property?
Yeah, so the number one thing that everybody should have is a revocable living trust, a family trust. We're all going to die someday.
Ah, there we go.
When the good Lord takes you, you never know. whether you're single, married, have kids, don't have kids, having a revocable living trust is something that everybody should do. And then when you form the LLC, there's 3 ways we can set up an LLC. I can list you as manager, member, or managing member. Well, the word member means owner. And there's no reason for us to put ownership on public record. So I form the LLC. I'm going to list you as the manager, and the membership or the ownership I'm going to assign to your revocable living trust for estate planning purpose. That's not on public record anyway. So step 1, get your family trust done. And then when you're ready to start making those investments, then you can order an LLC and or the land trust appropriately, but get that foundation in place for you and your family and your loved ones.
Oh my gosh, we didn't even touch on trust. I love that. Guys, that's another thing. If you want to take advantage of that as well, that is one of the first things you can start setting up for yourself. I mean, you can deed your home into that. You can deed your life insurance policies into that. There's a lot of, it's just a fantastic tool that I do not think we have the time to talk about today, but maybe that can be a separate episode we touch on in the future, Adam. But if you do want to talk to Adam and the amazing NCH team about trusts, business plans, setting up LLCs, S Corps, making sure that it's all in a smart, tax-advantaged way, and it's protecting you, and it's done in the right states, and all the stuff we talked about today. Oh, and by the way, of course, all the self-directed IRAs, 401ks, to make sure you can raise money from friends and family or from yourself. There's some rules about that too. To just have the ability to invest in other people's deals, perhaps. You can set up these IRAs and 401ks for yourself too. Go to activedutypassiveincome.com/IRA. I want to make it very easy for you guys. It's a very simple form. You just fill out, you get a calendar, you'll get somebody to reach out to you. And it's an amazing consultation where it's a deep dive into your personal situation. You're going to discuss where you are right now, what your goals are, what are some of the preconceived notions or obstacles you think that might be in the way, and you're going to get to the finish line. So cannot recommend that enough. Adam, is there anything we didn't touch on that you're like, you know what, I can't leave without mentioning something? If not, we're good to go. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so my last thing I want to mention to people is whether you have a business or you have rental properties, keep meticulous record. Get some systems in place where you keep receipts for everything. Like I say, the IRS never gets you the first year. It's always about 3 or 4 years down the road. So there's a lot of opportunity to save money in taxes through real estate or businesses, but keep good records and keep things organized monthly. That way tax time rolls around is so much easier.
Right. Oh my gosh. And again, Adam, thank you so much for all your wisdom and your strategic thinking about all this stuff. You've helped hundreds of our military members already. So guys, you want to get into business, you want to get into real estate investing, or you already have, and you need to clean up. You need a strategist on your team. Reach out to Adam and the NCH team. Everybody, thanks for tuning in. If you want to do us a little donation, all right, you're like, you know what, this was a valuable episode. All I ask you to do is just subscribe or share. Just share this episode with any friends and family, anybody in the military, because our mission is to impact 3 million military families in the next 10 years. We take that very seriously. We do that through things like the podcast. And again, I'll talk to you guys later. See you next week in the next episode. Markian Sich and Adam is out. Bye.